But I've realized that there's a way to add that context without driving people away. Hey artists and art lovers, it's Allison, and I'm doing another episode of The Artist Couch. I'm feeling excited because this week I'm in an art show called The Layers Within, and that's going to be up through November. And this week I'll be doing an interview with the curator to talk about my work and what inspired it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about because it's been a while since I've done like a face-to-face discussion about my work. Pretty much because of COVID, everything has been like through these videos or like on social media, over email, so it's going to be cool to actually have a conversation. So as I've been preparing for that, I've been kind of reminding myself of things to do to make sure that I don't sound crazy and like I know what I'm going to say and that I don't stumble too much over my words. So I thought it'd be fun to share like 3 things that I've learned that have made me better about talking about my art, and I think they're really helpful and good tips to have, but also it's kind of like it'll help me remember when I'm getting ready for this talk this week. So while I'm doing that, I'm working on this commission. This is the last portion of it. I'm just working on getting the sky filled in and then I will be done. And it's exciting because this has been weeks in the making, so yay! The first thing that I've learned and that's been really helpful for me is to practice what you want to say before you get out there. The first few times I would give like artist talks, or the first few times I would be asked about art, I wasn't expecting it to be as hard as it was to talk about myself and my work, because it seems like there wouldn't be anything that I would know better, so it didn't seem like it would be something I'd have to rehearse or think too hard about. But it's kind of like when you're going around a room and you're asked to like say something interesting about yourself. It's like suddenly like, what do I say? I know my work and I know what inspires it, but it's not something that I verbalize a lot, and it's also not something that everyone knows as well as I do. Having stumbled through a few explanations a couple of times, I realized like, okay, I really need to like take the time to write like an artist statement or just like a general idea of why art is important to me, what inspires me, why I work the way I do. And once I like wrote those things down and kind of got myself used to saying them, it became a lot easier when being asked like, oh, tell me about your work. I had something to pull from instead of just kind of thinking like, oh, what should I say? And that helped me not just in like interview type settings, but also when meeting people for the first time or when art events were a thing. Like when people would approach me like at my table or whatever and be like, oh, what's this about? Like, why do you like this work? And I actually did do another video like specifically about how to answer that question. And a lot of the things there also inform this. Like it really helps to have something like written down and rehearsed in your head that you can pull from. I never want to sound like I'm like reading off a script or like I had something memorized and I'm not like a real person, because I want to still connect with the person and still like give them a unique and different answer, because every setting is different, every project is different. But just having like those basic things written down is really helpful. So the second thing that's been really helpful for me is remembering not to minimize my work. I've had a bad habit, not just when talking about my work, but in general, kind of like being too modest, because I don't want to sound like I'm like full of myself, and when trying to just sound like humble, kind of like not giving myself enough credit. So an example was when someone asked like, oh, what kind of work do you do? And I was like, oh, I just draw. Or like, oh, I just make work based on this. Like adding in the just makes it sound smaller than it is, and it makes it sound like I don't think it's that great, when really like I love my work and I think my work is awesome, and I think lots of people like my work. And it makes such a difference if instead of saying, oh, I just draw, saying, I draw. Like, it sounds much more confident, much more decisive. I think everyone thinks drawing is pretty awesome, but if you say like, if I say I just draw, it makes people think like, oh, maybe it's not that good, or maybe she doesn't think it's as good as it is. I also would not be like really great at taking praise, and that's something that I'm working on. Like, if I were ever in situations where, you know, people are talking to me about my work and they're like, oh, your work is really amazing, or your work is really powerful, and I'd be like, oh, and I would kind of like brush it off. And I've been working on getting better at actually acknowledging those compliments and addressing them instead of just being like, oh, you know, because I mean, the person wouldn't say that, hopefully, unless they meant it, and it's kind of unfair to them to have them like say something meaningful and kind about your work and then just brush it off. So not only am I like doing myself a disservice by like minimizing it, but I'm also kind of like disrespecting their compliment. So that's something that I still catch myself doing it now and then, but I'm definitely getting better at it. Like, even just, I think, by acknowledging it here, that will help me going forward to not brush off compliments and not say like, oh, I just draw, or oh, I just do that. And it makes a huge difference in like the way people see you, and also it makes a difference in the way I see myself. Sorry, I keep switching between like the general you and talking about me specifically. I hope it's not too confusing. So the last thing that has been probably the most challenging for me, but has definitely helped me have more successful and engaging conversations about my work, is not being afraid to get personal. So a lot of my work is inspired by very like personal events, or just, you know, feelings, which I don't always like to talk about. And I also would sometimes worry that because this work is being inspired by something specific to me, or a feeling that I've had, like, I want my work to feel accessible to everyone. I don't want people to feel like, oh, well, I'm not Allison, so the work won't mean that for me the way it means that for her. So I would sometimes avoid giving like specific answers or personal context to my work, because I was worried that it would limit how many people would feel a connection to it. But I've realized that there's a way to add that context without driving people away, and more often than not, giving it that context makes more people feel connected to it than it does disconnected. I'm pretty sure the reason for that is like people want to know the story behind the work because it helps them feel like they understand it more. And even if it's something that they personally can't relate to, it gives them a broader understanding of the work in general, and when they look at it, they can think about that story. And people are great at finding ways to relate. We have more in common than we don't. And so I really think that even though it's not always like super comfortable to give full context and the full background to the story, I've realized that it helps build a better conversation, and it helps people actually feel much more connected to the work, and it helps people feel more engaged when they look at it. So those are the three big things that I've learned that have helped me talk more confidently about my work and helped me have better, more interesting conversations with people about my work. I hope those have been helpful. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know what your favorite subjects are, or what your favorite talking points are when you're talking about your work. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys later. Oh, before I go, here's where we're at. I don't know if you can tell how much has really gotten done, but it's a lot. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated on how this is going, and now that's the end. I'll talk to you guys later.